Good morning and welcome to Wake Up. Good morning, beautiful people. We are live.
The sun is rising, the sky is blue. Good morning, grand risings, let's see what's new. It's that time of day for Sonia and crew. Good morning, grand risings. It's time to wake up with Sonia.
It is indeed. Thank you so much for being here. It is indeed time to wake up. Grand Risings fam, says Arshin in the comments. How are you today? I hope you are well. Welcome to Wake Up, the show that knows you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And that can apply to any number of current situations where the pigs are trying to convince us they are the prince and princesses of this earthly realm. But we're not having it. No, we're not. It's my mum's birthday today, and I've lined up two powerful women for you and one fantastic giveaway to celebrate the power of the feminine. I'll be joined later by journalist Vanessa Beeley from the Middle East Frontline, as she is constantly there, God love her, and author and counsellor Catherine Stone, who will be talking to us about the power of the feminine. And men, don't switch off. That includes you as well. And we'll be looking at revelations, Lucy Letby, more to come, rape gang inquiries, Rupert Lowe, and now Maggie Oliver has thrown her own hat in the ring to do her own thing. And fact check the iPad confiscation headlines. Music industry, the death clause. Raymond asked me to consider that, and I have. And history revisited, the Titanic. Today in history, on the 14th of April, the Titanic was said to have struck the iceberg and then sunk in the early hours of April the 15th. And increasingly erratic, Russell Brand. And we'll end with the power of moving in silence. How are you all today? How are you? Are you well? Are you well? I need to start by sending a massive love, big love to Wake Up viewer Kath Hutton and her family. Narrow escape this weekend. A man crashed into their car. It's an absolute horror story what took place. Sadly, the elderly gentleman has passed away, but Kath and her family survived. Horrific accident. They're actually lucky to be alive at all. Her car flipped over 6 or 7 times before landing on the roof. The photos are indeed scary. I've seen one of them, horrendous. And I just want to send so much love out to Kath and Gaz and Kayana and Kieran, the whole family. A speedy recovery to you all. They are bashed, they are bruised, and poor Kieran has broken his leg. But honestly, they survived, and that is phenomenal. And rest in peace to the elderly gentleman. And please, thank you so much to the volunteer ambulance and rescue guys who happened to be passing by on their way home when the accident happened. And they'd been attending a rally, and they were able to take care of the situation immediately. That is phenomenal stuff. Kath, we send you so much love. You're a regular commenter here for us and a regular supporter of Wake Up, and we send you huge amounts of love. Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you so much. And just to say, sorry, we're not streaming on Rumble today. I keep forgetting it has to be programmed 24 hours before the stream starts. I will attempt to get it right on Wednesday. And this Friday is Good Friday. There won't be a Wake Up. Even I need a break from time to time, and I'm taking a long weekend. However, there will be a Wake Up on Easter Monday. So don't shout at me. Don't shout at me. And a number of commentators have contacted me since we talked about Prince on Friday. Good points made, actually. And some of them have said to me, because I'd gone down the rabbit hole of Dick Gregory's theory that Prince had died on the plane and that he'd been taken out, for sort of revenge for him breaking free from the music industry. And actually, I said, no, he didn't die on the plane because there is actually evidence that he attended a hospital, then his doctors shortly before he died. But a number of people pointed out to me, what Dick Gregory could actually have been talking about was when he was on the plane, that was the point when he started to basically descend towards his death. Something happened on the plane because he was unconscious on the plane. And you're right, that could exactly have been what Dick Gregory was talking about. That was the point when he was on the plane, when things started to go wrong. They always muddy the waters. They always do indeed. And we will be looking at the Titanic. Is it the greatest fraud in modern history? I'll be looking forward to seeing what you have to say about that. And headlines, how interesting. I often find this happens. We talk about something, or we plan to talk about something, and then something else happens. And on this occasion, this is what happened. On Friday, we revisited the Manchester Arena bombing attack with author David Hughes. And on Saturday, one of the men convicted of being involved was said to have attacked prison guards. This is Hashem Abedi. He is the brother of Salman Abedi, who was said to have launched the bomb at Manchester Arena, which obviously is extremely controversial, the whole story. Hashem Abedi is serving life at the high security prison HMP Frankland in County Durham for helping his brother plot the 22 murders in the Manchester Arena bombing. And he launched an absolute savage, vicious attack on several officers. The officers sustained burns, scalds, stab wounds. Abedi threw hot cooking oil over them before using makeshift weapons to stab them in an unprovoked and vicious attack. He was preparing food in the kitchen at the Category A jail, and he just kind of went insane. He's said to have produced 2 homemade weapons with 20-centimeter long blades before he started slashing at 2 of the officers, as well as another officer. One of the guards was stabbed in the neck once. Another officer was stabbed 5 times in the back. And they're recovering. Apparently, they're recovering. 2 are still in hospital, serious injuries. 1 was discharged yesterday. All 3 members of staff also suffered burns and scalds. And it's just weird. The whole thing's just a bit weird. Like, I'm not being funny, but this guy has been convicted of terrorism, but somehow he seems to be able to produce huge blades and working with hot oil. Interesting stuff. If it's true, lenticular cloud, that's right. He's a nasty piece of work if it's true. Indeed. And I see there's lots of attacks on Joe Rogan at the moment with the idea that he has allowed people to talk freely over the years, and that has resulted in misinformation. So what though? You don't have to be a fan of Joe Rogan to know that it's his sodding podcast and he can talk about whatever he wants on there, and that includes who he wants on there. But this is a political attack, by the way, from well-known Zionists. The lobby absolutely hate freedom of speech if it involves any criticism of Israel. And that's exactly where this current criticism is coming from. Zionists and their supporters. Because Joe Rogan has had guests on who talk about Israel's atrocities. So we had, for example, Douglas Murray back on there. And what an insufferable, horrible snob. And, you know, like, this is a man who has Palestine derangement syndrome, but I cannot stand Douglas Murray. He thinks that he is intellectually superior to everybody else. And he's just a puppet. He's just a puppet. But he was on Joe Rogan's and he was really sniffy about people like Ian Carroll as one example. Now, the thing is, I don't know enough about Ian Carroll. I don't know what his gig is. I know that he's fairly a new kid on the block, that he came up through TikTok. He seems to be saying some interesting things. And I don't know whether he's legit or not, but I do know that it's Joe Rogan's business who he has on his podcast, as I say, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Douglas Murray. Absolutely nothing. And I have to agree with Senk from the Young Turks on this, said, most unbearable part of Douglas Murray is his BS pretension that he's an authority figure. Yeah, he did this thing with the comedian Dave Smith, who's talked a lot about Israel. And Douglas Murray was like, have you been to Israel? Have you been to the checkpoint? Have you done this? Have you been to the crossover and everything? And it's like Douglas Murray, there was absolutely brilliant video that was put online yesterday of Douglas Murray saying, I'll talk about whatever I want. It's my business. But suddenly when it comes to Israel, you can't talk about Israel. I cannot stand him. I literally cannot stand him. When I hear him talk, I just want to puke. Yes, that's how I feel. Absolutely. Murray had his arse handed to him. It was glorious, Jack. It was absolutely glorious. He did. Absolutely, he did. This is interesting stuff that's come out this weekend. We talk a lot about Nurse Lucy Letby, obviously former neonatal nurse, now serving many life sentences. She was convicted of the murder of 7 babies and convicted of the attempted murder of a further 7. But this is absolutely huge, what's come out this weekend. Absolutely huge. The only medical witness at Lucy Letby's 2 trials has been found to have contradicted his information to the police and at trial to what he previously said to colleagues. So an email of May the 4th, 2017, which was only disclosed to the defence after both trials, from Dr. Ravi Jairam, who has become something of a TV celebrity on the back of Lucy Letby. But there's this email, and it's part of extensive correspondence with a group of doctors who were attempting to sort of pique the interest of police, who they wanted to conduct an investigation into what was happening at the hospital. And in this email chain, Dr. Ravi Jairam admits that Lucy Letby attempted to alert him about baby K, and yet in his court testimonies, he's said quite the contrary, that she did nothing. She just stood there. This is a really serious contradiction. This is like trialable contradiction. This is an unsafe verdict kind of contradiction. This is really, really serious. And so Dr. Jairam, in contradiction of that 2017 email, Dr. Jairam told the police in a witness statement on April the 17th, 2018, it is also the case that Lucy had not called me to the nursery at the point that desaturation had taken place. Quite often, a nurse will come looking for a doctor to assist when a baby begins to deteriorate. And then at the 2024 trial, he portrayed her as suspicious, saying Lucy Letby was stood next to the incubator. She wasn't looking at me. She didn't have her hands in the incubator. And yet he actually said in this original email, at time of deterioration, staff nurse Letby was at incubator and called Dr. Jairam to inform of low saturation. So which is it? Did she stand around idly while a baby was dying, or did she seek help from a man who then testified against her? I know which one. I know 100% which one it is. Absolutely. The one that Dr. Jairam said at the beginning. She sought help. That's what she did. She sought help. This is looking increasingly like a witch hunt. I don't think we can rule that out. And you have to bear in mind, her barrister earlier this month, Letby's barrister, Mark MacDonald, presented a 698-page report from 14 world-leading experts. It was presented to the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, a sort of toothless body whose job it is to refer cases to the Court of Appeal. And we are hoping that they will do that on this occasion. Many, many people disagree with this conviction. High-profile public names putting reputations on the line. And it is also possible that we are now starting to see quite clearly what was happening at that hospital and the people involved. Let's not forget that Lucy Letby had been bullied and she had made a complaint, and her complaint was upheld 10 months before Dr. Jairam sent the 2017 email. Letby had been moved to clerical work as a result of concerns raised by Dr. Jairam and others. But she had lodged a grievance for bullying and harassment, which was upheld. And CPS admit to not becoming aware of Jairam's email until August 2024, and after she had been convicted. Right, what we need to know is who knew about that email. This is very serious. This is like some form of tampering taking place, it would appear, allegedly. Of course, the Thirlwell inquiry have not discussed this email, and they have refused to pause the inquiry. That is Lady Justice Thirlwell. There's an ongoing police investigation at the hospital. Countess of Chester Hospital said that due to the Thirlwell inquiry and ongoing police investigations, that it wouldn't be appropriate to comment on this at this moment in time. This is looking really bad. This is literally looking bad. How can they not realize that this is an unsafe conviction? How can they not? And really interesting what's going on regarding the whole kind of grooming gang inquiries. Maggie Oliver has launched her own inquiry today. Now, I'm wondering whether this is going to kind of clash with what Rupert Lowe is already doing. Maggie Oliver, of course, former Greater Manchester police officer, one of the first people to actually be aware of what was going on in the north of England regarding grooming gangs. She's, as I say, launched her own thing. It is, let me tell you about it. So she has teamed up with survivors Elizabeth Harper and Samantha Smith to appeal for funds to launch investigations with legal action into the public bodies and individuals that failed to act in national scandal. And I was reading it, and it sounds very, very similar in some respects to what Rupert Lowe is doing. And I wondered why Maggie Oliver wasn't involved in the Rupert Lowe inquiry, but it could well be that Maggie Oliver realizes that she needs to do her own thing. And I'll tell you why shortly, because I'm not entirely impressed with some of the people that Rupert Lowe has already got involved with this gang inquiry that he's talking about. So what Maggie Oliver is talking about, she goes on to say she's issues an extensive press release, but she says in October 2022, ICSA, which was the child abuse inquiry, published its final report highlighting systemic failures where institutions often prioritise their reputation over child welfare. The report made several urgent recommendations, such as introducing mandatory reporting. And none of that has happened, which is why I find it so egregious that you have all these Tories and standing up going, it's so wrong. Let us not allow this to happen. But you had years to fix it. You had years to implement the recommendations of the child abuse inquiry, and you didn't. So I'm not really interested in Tories suddenly emerging going, oh, this is so wrong, we've got to change it. No, you had a chance to do something and you didn't, which will bring me very shortly to Rupert Lowe's inquiry and why I'm starting to get a bit concerned, kids, right? So also, I am aware that people are extremely distressed and angry to hear. I mean, it's not new news. It's news that's been around for quite a long time, but it's just been released for some reason. And that is members of the Rotherham Grooming Gang received over £500,000 in legal aid. There was a total of 611,204 in aid, with the gang's ringleader receiving a total of 143,000. And in this particular case, 7 defendants were convicted. The total jail sentences for 101 years in 2018 for their abuse of 5 girls in Rotherham between 1998 and 2005. But the thing is, that is justice in this country, is if you fulfill the criteria for legal aid, you can get it regardless of what, because people must be seen to be innocent unless proven otherwise. They must be. That is about justice. And I know it's hard, and I know it sticks in your craw and all of that, but it is what it is, unfortunately. And so just to go back to the Maggie Oliver thing. So the idea is very much to launch this #TheyKnew campaign. And the idea is to look for action for accountability. And it is led by Maggie Oliver's organisation. She is, of course, a whistleblower. And A4A will engage lawyers to investigate the actions of the police, local authorities and other public bodies, as well as individuals, to determine whether private prosecution, civil claims or other legal actions should be brought. They need 125 grand. That will increase. That will 100% increase. But that's what they say they need in order to be able to do that. But that seems incredibly similar. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but it seems incredibly similar to what Rupert Lowe is doing. Rupert Lowe, of course, former Reform member of Parliament. And he recently launched his Grooming Gang inquiry. And the last time I checked, he's now up to announcing 3 people. And one of them I'm absolutely in total support of. Absolutely in total support. And that is Rajah Miah. Rajah Miah has been on with us before, great whistleblower, exposed a lot what was going on in Oldham, and he's been announced on Rupert Lowe's inquiry. And it's interesting, out of the 3 announcements, Rajah is the only one who says he's not going to be receiving a payment, which suggests to me that the other 2 are. And the other 2 I'm really concerned about, and one in particular. And you've got to bear in mind, I've been all through this before with the child abuse inquiry, the selection of it, and quite inappropriate people originally selected, and then public opinion was, no, these people aren't appropriate. So some of these people may get shoved off, but I hope Rajah Miah isn't one of them. And what they're attempting to answer is what happened, how did it happen, why was it allowed to happen? So it's not entirely the same as Maggie's, because Maggie's is about bringing prosecutions, and the problem about Rupert's is that it will have no legal background or backbone or legal power whatsoever. It will not be able to command people to give testimony, witness testimony. It will not be able to enforce laws, nothing at all. It will just be, the idea is, as I say, to discover what happened, how did it happen, and why was it allowed to happen, which will, I'm sure, intersect with what's going on with Maggie. Anyway, last time I checked, 18,000 supporters. Rupert Lowe is describing it as the biggest political crowdfunder in British history. And it is huge, obviously. And so these people, right, as well as Rajah Miah, we also have, let me find him. No, that's Keir Starmer. Definitely not Keir Starmer. We have James McMurdoch. I don't actually know him. He's an MP for South Basildon, a Reform MP. You can see Rupert Lowe behind him when Rupert Lowe was still part of the whole Reform team. And so he's been announced as one of the people on the panel of the rape gang inquiry. Now, I'm very deeply concerned about politicians getting involved in a panel, because my research is that politicians are too highly linked with the abuse that has taken place in this country. And of course, I'm not suggesting for a second that James McMurdoch is, but James McMurdoch moves with politicians. It is easy to be compromised, which brings me to the one that I'm absolutely horrified that he's announced. And I can't for the life of me work out why he has. And that is Esther McVey. Or around here, we call her Fester McVey, Conservative MP for Tatton, former cabinet minister. And I mean, I don't even know where to go with this. Why did he choose this woman? This is a woman who, I mean, just horrific. Let me just show you. This is literally me chasing her. I don't think it's playing a sound, but you can actually see it. So that you can actually see her there. She's there with Ian Duncan Smith. And the reason I show that, so this is me and Lee, my cameraman. This is about 10 years ago now. And she is somebody who was dumping on working class people. She should be nowhere near a grooming gang inquiry, which predominantly impacted working class victims, right? And the fact that he's brought in Esther McVey deeply, deeply concerns me. And there's no mention that she's not going to be paid. So I suggest that she is. I would suggest that James is being paid. And it would appear that the one voice that so far that I can say, yeah, he absolutely should be on that panel is not going to be paid, right? It's not going to be paid for this. So, and I am concerned. I'm deeply concerned. Because Esther McVey is not somebody I would readily associate with the vulnerability of these working class girls who the treatment that has happened to them needs to be examined. She has been in Parliament for far too long. And of course, I'm making no allegations about Esther McVey whatsoever. I just don't bloody understand why Rupert Lowe would think that she is somebody who has any understanding of what has taken place. And I'm absolutely aware that she has a charity, but lots of people have charities, and oftentimes charities are fronts, right? But she is not somebody that I would readily associate with understanding what has taken place, the abuse that has taken place for working class people. She's a long-term Tory, notoriously been involved in penalising working class people via her party. As I say, she was Ian Duncan Smith's underling, who savagely was involved in cutting sick and disabled benefits for ideological austerity, which was at the time was headed up by her boss, David Cameron. No, these people shouldn't be anywhere near it. So far, one okay. The James, fine, I don't know enough about him, but Esther McVey, absolutely not. I'm horrified that she's been included. Absolutely bloody horrified. Yes, indeed I am. Right. Keir Starmer, anybody see? So last week when he was saying that he was going to end globalism and everything, what he ended up doing was also giving this big speech about anti-social behaviour. And it was unquestionably, see if you can guess what this was an attack on. Ready?
Of their children through the windows. And I'm sure you've all...
Let me start that again.
He came to see me in my surgery, who said that every night cannabis smoke comes up from the streets and the corridors in their block into the rooms of their children through the windows. And I'm sure you've all heard this, but all of my career, whether as a lawyer, a prosecutor, or a politician, people have said to me, antisocial behaviour, Keir, it's low-level crime. Well, it isn't. It really affects individuals, their families, and their communities, and inhibits what they can do. So
let me get this straight. Antisocial behaviour, according to Keir Starmer, is cannabis. Do we feel another attack coming? Now, this just reminded me, let me just bring this in, this will make you laugh. This reminded me of when OFCOM smacked my hand. OFCOM Broadcasting Bulletin, 16th of June, 2014. They said that I had promoted cannabis during a broadcast, and it was really funny. And it was the complaint was upheld against me, and I got a smacked hand, and they said I'd breached their standards by promoting medical cannabis. I was just promoting it, they said. And it was during the same week when Jerry Springer also got in trouble, Sex and the City, and here comes Honey Boo Boo. Well, what an illustrious group of people and programs that I was amongst. But think about that, right? It was actually a program that I did on TPV, The People's Voice, and it was about medicinal cannabis, and some absolute loser, it only took one person, it was only one person, reported me to Ofcom, and then they did an investigation into me and whether I'd given both sides to the argument, and then they found against me. And so we know that they've been penalising people for a very, very long time. So I'm not at all surprised to hear Keir Starmer use that as an example of anti-social behaviour. And yes, Care Bear. That's right. It is. But what was interesting was that even though it is legal in the UK since 2018, the broadcasting regulator, although that was 2013, of course, but the broadcasting regulator still will not tolerate it, because I had somebody recently who contacted me and said that they had been accused of promoting cannabis, and that was as recent as 2024. So something is still not okay, right? Ofcom still dodgy. And don't forget that one of the biggest exports that we actually have is cannabis, believe it or not. And in fact, I remember when Theresa May was Prime Minister and her hubby had interests in exporting cannabis. So there you go. Interesting stuff. And I want to reflect on this story because I think it's always important to check out what's garnering so much attention. This iPad story, right? We're told that a mum was arrested because she had confiscated her daughter's iPads, right? That's what we've been told. We heard that Surrey police had arrested this mum, had banged her up because she had confiscated her daughter's iPads. And I just thought, you know what? This is literally all over mainstream media, all over legacy media, all over so-called alternative media, because you have these people now who think they're alternative media and they're not alternative media at all. But they're like, as soon as they see a story like this, which they think is anti-police and shows kind of like some kind of oppression in the state, they leap on it. But I decided to do a deep dive in it, and I'm sure I won't surprise you to hear that the story is not quite as told, right? Not quite as told at all. And actually what happened was Vanessa Brown is the mother at the heart of this. She was arrested on Wednesday, March the 26th, after the iPads belonging to her children were traced to her mother's house in Cobham. Well, obviously, on the surface of it, you're like, that is absolutely mad. A mother is just doing her job, you know, taking away iPads, probably too much screen time for her children, as if that was the real story. Not at all. Not at all. And actually what happened was that the police were called to this property, right? There was a man there, and I'm assuming this was some sort of domestic taking place. And actually Vanessa Brown was not arrested to do with taking the iPads. That's not what happened, right? No wonder she said to LBC, I find it quite traumatic even talking about this now. There was an overreaction of that, I'm absolutely certain, but there was much more going on. And that included this man, whoever he is, but not been named, not been identified, actually saying that these iPads have been stolen. Well, the police have to investigate that. Police have to investigate that. That isn't necessarily them just overreacting. We have to be really careful about who's leaping on these stories. But there is so much more to this story that we haven't yet got to the bottom of. But this is a domestic situation. And what actually happened was there was concern about the behaviour in that property. This is nothing to do with iPads. There is absolutely nothing to do with iPads. And Surrey police, they were forced to issue a statement, you know, talking about this. And there were some procedure delays. They were awaiting an ambulance to the property. That's nothing to do with iPads, kids, right? And also then there was like a load of bunkum about how the officers who attended the property were ending their shift and therefore replaced by two of their colleagues. The woman was then taken into custody where the necessary procedures were followed. This was about a safety concern. This was about a safety in the home concern. And what had happened was that the iPads, I think, were at her mum's house. She hadn't stolen them. She'd bought them for her children. They belonged to her, or they belonged to her children. She'd given them to her children. And this man, whoever this man is, and as I say, I'm assuming it's a domestic because that's what it sounds like, had said, stolen the iPads, but there is a problem here. And there was a problem in the home. iPads is very secondary to all of this, but see how everybody leads with it. And I think that's a problem. And you see, the thing is, let me be clear. Since Starmer took stewardship, censorship in the UK has absolutely gone up several gears. I do not deny that at all. But there are people who will exploit from all angles. And there are people and organizations who are making money off the backs of these nonsense stories. And it's almost like crowding the marketplace, right? And I just want to be sure that what is being massively promoted, as this story was, across all of legacy media is actually what happened. And this is not actually what happened. That is the reality. Are the powers that be focusing us on distractions while they get away with the big stuff? It would appear so to me. Yes, indeed. That is what it would appear to me. I want to bring in my first guest. You all know her. So let's just bring her in. Here she is, Vanessa Beeley. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi, Sonia. Good morning and happy birthday to your mum, I believe.
Oh, thank you. You heard. Yeah. Oh, no, I'd already told you, hadn't I? I said I want you to come on this day. Absolutely. Thank you, darling. Thank you. My mummy in heaven. Yeah, she was a badass like us, Vanessa. Right. So yes, she was. Yes, she was. Vanessa, of course, is an independent journalist and she's worked extensively in the Middle East. And I just really wanted, I mean, so many people contact me, Vanessa, when I bring on people talking about the Middle East and they say, have you talked to Vanessa Beeley about this? And I'm like, no, but I will, I promise. And the most recent one was to do with Yemen. And obviously you're the person, you know what's going. Please help us to understand. Take us away from the headlines. What's really taking place in Yemen at the moment? She's just frozen. Is our Vanessa just
under the Genocide Convention. Oh, have I frozen?
Mm-hmm.
Am I back? Okay. Basically, I think, to put it very simplistically, of course, Yemen has been at war since 2015. It's been under crippling siege and economic blockade on humanitarian relief, medical relief, and so on, under UN Resolution 2216, which is a completely illegitimate resolution. It targets 7 people, not the 34 million Yemenis that are suffering as a result of this resolution, which was created by the UN and is being exploited by Saudi Arabia and the US and so on, and the UK, to basically cripple Yemen. So that began in 2015, despite the UN peace envoy at the time, Jamal Ben Omar.
Frozen.
Saying, this is normal. This is what we see all the time, particularly in West Asia or the Middle East, as people know it, that the West just does what it wants, basically, and violates every single international law that has ever existed in order to cripple the region and prevent it being a threat to the security of their pariah state, Israel, that has been committing genocide against Palestinians for the last 100 years, but intensively since October the 7th. And so effectively what Yemen did collectively, not just some tribal faction called the Houthis, the entire movement, the resistance movement, which is known in the region as Ansarullah, the Party of God, which formed a coalition government constitutionally elected of a coalition of 38 political parties in Yemen. So it represents the majority of Yemenis, took the decision to basically stand with the Geneva Convention, Articles 1 and 2, I think it is, to prevent genocide and to punish those that are committing genocide, which we know is Israel against the Palestinians, but it's also expanding that genocidal activity into Lebanon and Syria as we speak. And so the Yemenis took the decision that what they could do is to prevent the shipping of weapons and equipment and supplies to the Zionists while they're carrying out the genocide by targeting shipping in the Red Sea. And so effectively what we now have is an escalation by President Trump that many of us warned would happen the minute that he was elected. And he's basically waging war against the Yemenis to sustain the genocide in Palestine. That is basically what's happening right now. It's not by America as proxies for Israel to prevent, continue the genocide against Palestinians.
Some of his social media posts are absolutely grotesque. He was doing a big hoo-ha. I think it was last week after they just bombed one building. This, I mean, like you say, we knew. No, you knew. People like you knew. People like me didn't necessarily know, although when it comes to Trump, I kind of did. But this must be so exasperating for you. How long have you been out there now covering all of this?
Really since 2012, when I was actually in Gaza during the Israeli aggression of 2012. I went back there in 2013, and then I got involved in the Syria case. I guess from 2013, 2014 onwards, I entered Syria for the first time in 2016, and was then covering the majority of the war from 2016 until, of course, I had to leave in December last year when finally the international coup was successful and imposed an Al-Qaeda junta government or regime in Damascus that is now conducting ethnic cleansing and another genocide inside Syria. It seems to be that Western governments in particular, whether it's the UK, the US, or EU member states, only seem able to sow violence, savagery, genocide, ethnic cleansing, while of course claiming that they're developing these countries that were perfectly developed, but are now of course regressing to the dark ages under the projects that are being run by the UK and the US in particular, but with their allies in Turkey, the Gulf states, and of course we can't forget Israel, for whose security the majority of these wars have been waged in the first place.
Talking about Israel, I don't think I've ever seen an administration like Trump's where so many people are prepared to actually say Israel first. Have you ever seen anything like it?
No, and again, this was something that, you know, many of us were warning about prior to the elections. And what we were being told is, look, Palestine's only one issue. And this is something that I really want to address, because if people think Israel is only one issue, they're forgetting who runs Israel, which is the entire global Zionist movement. And it's the Zionist movement which is embedded effectively in every single sector of society in the West. If you look at the UK 2030 Israel-UK roadmap, it's a very sobering document. It shows that Israel, aka the spy units, the surveillance units that have been turning areas like Hebron and the occupied territories into a brutal smart city, basically, you know, with surveillance, but surveillance obviously that contains weapons and targeting equipment that can basically eliminate a Palestinian in a second. And these entities are now embedded in our societal structure in the West. And so when people say it's only one issue, this is completely erroneous, because this issue is going to have an effect on every single aspect of our lives and society now and in the future. And as Israel expands its power and basically destroys those countries that have stood in resistance against its ethnic cleansing, genocidal policies, then of course, what's it going to do? It's going to become one of the most powerful entities in the world, backed by the entire oligarchy complex in the US, UK, and EU. And it's going to basically be affecting all of us, not only the people here in the region. So we were arguing for this and saying that basically Trump's administration was packed full of Zionist supporters and also Christian Zionists, which is an oxymoron in itself, but nevertheless believers in this kind of end world doctrine that means that they have to bring about Armageddon in order to engender the second coming of Christ, which of course is entirely ridiculous in my opinion. I mean, you shouldn't be fast forwarding something that should happen naturally in a spiritual way, right? I mean, that's putting it very simply. Yeah. But effectively, that's what the Trump administration is full of. And this is what we were saying. And people were simply, you know, sticking their fingers in their ears and still believing in the two-party paradigm, which doesn't exist anywhere, particularly in the UK. I mean, we don't have any difference anymore between Labour and Tory as regards their policies, and it's the same in the US. There's no difference. There's a roadmap that is designed by the deep state and the Pentagon and the ruling elite, transnational ruling elite, and each president has a role to play on that roadmap. And it's very clear what Trump's role is this time around.
I mean, I'm nowhere near as invested as you are. I think I'm on a very late catch up over the last 2 years where it's become apparent to me about how it's all linked up, right? It was never really my ball, right? But the more that I've looked, the more scary it's become. And when I saw, for example, that AI generated ad that Trump put out where he was like, you know the one I'm talking about, where he was taking over Gaza. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, talk about God complex. It was extraordinary. But that literally made me feel physically sick. I cannot imagine how it would have impacted you out there on the front line. You are seeing the misery that is being caused to people, the devastation. What was your reaction when you saw that? Because I think there was a big statement in that.
You know, the depravity that is now on full display from the West. From the reports that have recently been published, even in Hebrew media, about the culture in Israeli society of pedophilia, of child abuse, of rape, of sexual harassment, of ritual and religious child abuse ceremonies where children are raped by family members, by relatives during religious ceremonies. I've actually published this report at my Substack, but I've written previously about the fact that Israel is a culture of pedophilia, right? And the fact that many rapists or pedophiles, for example, in the US, are they're converting to Judaism because they know that Israel is a haven for pedophiles. So they're converting to Judaism. This is documented. And then they're moving to Israel where they are protected.
There's an article, I've been reading it this morning. I think it's on your Substack, Israel's history of pedophilia. Now, obviously, the moment you say a statement like that, people are like, oh, this has got to be anti-Semitism and everything. We've got to be careful about that because obviously we see what's happening in America and we must not allow that to happen where literally students are being, arrested on the street and attempts to deport them under this guise of anti-Semitism simply because they're protesting genocide. But talk to us about this article, what you're talking about, Israel's history of pedophilia, because I think this all links up with the whole kind of Mossad, Epstein, and how many people are compromised, right? Talk to us.
Well, I mean, you only have to look, as I've mentioned at the end of the article, which, as I said, was actually published in Israel Hayom. This was the one that I most recently published. I'd also written about Israel being a haven for pedophiles previously, and I included that in a link in the article that covered the Israel Hayom investigation. So this was an investigation by Hebrew press. It's not an investigation by me. It's not an investigation by anyone that can be accused of anti-Semitism, right? And basically what it reveals is that Israel, from north to south, east to west, has a culture of pedophilia, child abuse, both through educational institutions, through religious institutions, through every sector that a child should find safety and refuge within, right? These children have been abused, they've been raped, they've been basically under the religious ceremonial pretext, they've been told that if they don't allow themselves to be sacrificed, which means to be raped multiple times, then another child from their family will be taken. And the thing is that you can't look at this in isolation, because if you look at the rape of Palestinian prisoners by the Israeli military in prisons like State Eiman, for example, and the actual fact that rather than protesting the rape of Palestinian prisoners, there were protests to prevent the prosecution of the rapists and the sodomists, right? And there is ongoing history and documentation of rape and abuse of children, of organ theft, of abuse and humiliation, ritual abuse and humiliation of Palestinian prisoners, even medical staff. There's a doctor whose name escapes me right now, but he's been in prison for, I think it's around 2 months now, and another doctor who died as a result of the sodomy and the rape and the torture that was carried out against him. So it becomes clear that this is a culture that is not only indoctrinated with hate from a very young age. If you look at a film called Israelism, it will demonstrate very clearly that even from kindergarten, the children are indoctrinated with hate and dehumanization of Palestinians, right? But not only that, if they're then growing up in a culture of abuse, how many times does a victim of abuse become an abuser?
Right.
Or how is this abuse basically so pervasive in Israeli society that we see it being projected onto Palestinian prisoners that have already been dehumanized anyway? So in other words, they're ripe for this kind of abuse and perversion and depravity. But we also have to remember who created the Zionist entity, who created the Zionist movement. It was the British, right? And it was then adopted by the US. And even if you look at what Al-Qaeda, so-called HTS, is doing in Syria, it's very similar tactics: rape, child trafficking, organ trafficking, and so on. And we have to look at the root of this, the origin. It comes from those who rule over us and govern over us, right? Because this wouldn't be allowed to happen without their endorsement.
Even as you're speaking, I'm seeing some people saying that they're having their comments removed by YouTube as they're literally typing in response to what you're saying, right? And that tells us so much, because what we have is like the so-called world's, richest man uses his platform to talk about all of the abuse that's happening in the UK, right? And obviously there is terrible abuse. I made a film called Pedophiles in Parliament. I know it, right? But they don't want to look at Israel, do they? And in fact, even what you're saying is so controversial, Vanessa. And as you say, it's nothing to do with me. I'm literally, this was said, right? I don't have a dog in this race, but it's so controversial what you're saying. I don't understand how we've got to this stage where to even question what's going on in Israel is so problematic.
Well, it's problematic because I think it was Robert F. Kennedy that said this very clearly before Trump was elected. And in fact, before Robert F. Kennedy Jr. became part of the campaign. But he said very clearly that the security of Israel is paramount. One, because it's a military outpost and bulwark for the US in the region. It provides surveillance, it provides interference, that was his words. But it also provides an obstacle to the expansion of, for example, Iran or of China with the Belt and Road Initiative. Because if we look at the India Middle East Economic Corridor, where does it cut through? It goes from Mumbai through the Gulf states into the occupied territories of Palestine, and then into Egypt and then to Europe. So it's very clear that Israel per se, I don't think is important to the West. But what is important is Israel's position in West Asia, and its security effectively translates to the security of the US and the UK, and the US and the UK and the EU's interests in the region. And that means bringing all of, for example, the Sunni states, as they call them, the Sunni Islamic states, under the control of Israel in order to prevent any threat to the security and stability of Israel. And we've seen that with the Abraham Accords, which of course were initially brought in under the first Trump administration by his waterfront developer son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And that basically is trying to bring Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and Bahrain, all of those Gulf states not under the control, but under the normalization project with Israel. Egypt is already, in my opinion, the Ukraine of West Asia, because it's completely in hock to the IMF, to the EU, to Israel and to the Gulf states. It has very little sovereignty left. Jordan is a weakened state. It's a vassal state of the British, actually. And it's going to do nothing to basically destabilize Israel, because it knows, and it's been threatened with the potential for destabilization of Jordan should it step out of line and should it cease to be an air defense base for the US and for Israel. So what remains, Syria now has effectively been broken as the land bridge between Iran, Iraq, and the resistance in Lebanon and Palestine. So and Israel is expanding now territorial gain into Syria in the south of Syria, and it intends to extend up the eastern corridor towards Iraq. So, you know, what we're now seeing at play is a war effectively against the entire resistance axis in order to secure the stability and security for Israel for the future, for the foreseeable future. That's why Syria's entire military capability was destroyed one day after December the 8th, when Damascus finally fell.
Let me read you this statement from Crafty King. She says, Israel is pivotal. When it falls, the whole deep state will collapse. Is it that pivotal?
Again, I would argue not necessarily Israel, because I think if Israel fell, and there is a very high risk that economically Israel might fail, that there might be a civil war between the very far right extremist factions in Israel and the Knesset, which I wouldn't describe as being left or center. It is still to the right, but it's not as far right as some of the other factions. And there is a war going on between certain factions, those two factions in Israel. But if Israel were to fall, as I've said, you still have the entire global Zionist movement, right? And they're not going to actually allow Israel to fall unless they need it to fall for a reason. And so I think what we should be doing is not separating Israel from that global Zionist movement. I mean, Professor David Miller is the one that I would recommend people go to actually read about the Zionist movement as opposed to the Zionist lobby and how powerful it is globally. And so I think we need to see the two together, not as separate entities.
Got you. And also it's important to remember that not all Zionists are Jewish and not all Jews are Zionists, right? I mean, that's, we have to separate that, because that's when it gets messy, because there's a whole load of people in Israel who are rising up against what's taking place, but we hardly ever get to hear from them, do we?
I think the ones that are potentially rising up are what are known as, rather derogatorily, the Mizrahi Jews, who were the actual original Jews that were there in the Middle East even before kind of 1917 and the Balfour Treaty, and when the European Jewish settlers started to enter Palestine. And those Jews are actually very much sort of discriminated against, not on a par with the Palestinians, but they are perceived as not being pure Jews by the kind of Ashkenazi Jews that settled in Israel, particularly post-1948. And so there are elements within Israel, but as Alistair Crook, who is former MI6 and worked in Israel for years, has said, probably 80 to 90% of Israelis' population want the genocide of Palestinians. So it's there's no longer a big divide between Israeli citizens, because, as they said, if we come back to the indoctrination that Israelis have from birth, you know, they're brought up to believe in this hatred and need for elimination of the Palestinian existence in what is perceived as their territory, their land.
And they, of course, would say the same happens in Palestine, that the Palestinian children are raised to hate them as well. How do you respond to that?
I lived in Gaza, or I stayed in Gaza, and I will tell one story. While I was there, in fact, the day after I arrived, there was a 13-year-old boy, Hamid Abu Daga, who was playing football outside his house after school. An Israeli helicopter in front of us came in and strafed him, killed him on sight. And I remember going to the funeral, attending the funeral, and when I came back in 2013, I went back to see the family. And I remember speaking to the father outside, and I said, what would you do, or what would you say to the pilot that killed your son? He had tears rolling down his cheeks. It still makes me kind of tear up when I think about it now. And he said, I would just ask him, how? How could you kill a child? Do you not have children? These children are not brought up to hate, Sonia. But what do you expect?
Right.
When they are literally burned alive, when they're raped, when they see their parents killed in front of them. It's not hatred. It's a need for justice. And it's a drive for resistance against what is a genocide. This is a completely, if your family is being raped in front of you, your house is being burned, and your property is being taken from you, it's not hate, but it's wrong.
It's something
and
deep in the
therefore you
core
would
of
want
you.
to correct. Yes.
Yeah, I understand
but
that.
There's no hate. There's no hate. There's very little. If you go to Palestine,
I do get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about this week, because obviously it's a holy week for many people around the world. It's Easter. How does that kind of pan out over there? Because you talked about Christian Zionists before, but how does Easter work in the Middle East?
Exactly the same as anywhere else. In fact, if anything, the Christian communities are far stronger and far more integrated, particularly when I was living in Syria. Lebanon is a little bit different. It's a more of a kind of a sectarian state. So people are very much divided into their religious identity, much more than in Syria. In Syria, it was a nation state. I'm saying was, because I don't believe it is right now, as a result of what's gone on there since December last year. But in Syria, the Christians and the Muslims and all the other minority sects were completely integrated and shared their cultural festivals and celebrations quite happily. Here, it's very much it's similar, but as I said, they're more separated. So here, everyone celebrated Palm Sunday yesterday. It is Monday today, right? Yes.
It is Monday.
And I'm losing track. But it's still, the problem in the region is part of the Western agenda is to drive the Christians out of the region. And that's another aspect which is very important, because effectively they want the Christians gone, because the Christians act as a sort of a buffer between the Sunni and Shia Muslims, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah, it does.
So they want the Christians gone. So they've created environments in which the Christians feel threatened, as they are now in Syria, and they were previously since 2011 under the regime change war, when the terrorist factions, proxies of the UK and the US, were targeting Christian communities. Many of them already left. And now we're back in a similar situation in Syria, where they're again under threat of ethnic cleansing.
So just circular
and persecution.
Keep going round and round. It's awful,
Yeah.
awful. One quick question before you go. Sean Parker says, does Vanessa think British lawyers are right to push for Hamas to be delisted as terrorists in the UK? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, they are. And Hezbollah should be de-prescribed also. It's ridiculous. What threat are Hamas and Hezbollah to the UK? They're not. They're a threat to Israelis and to Israel's national security. That's why they're being prescribed a terrorist group by the UK. It has nothing to do with the UK's national security. This is protection of Israel. And I raise the question, who do we in the UK or you in the UK represent the government? Does it represent UK interests, or does it represent Israeli interests? And to what extent do Israeli interests override British interests? And I think that's what every British citizen should be looking at.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You're an absolute powerhouse, everybody. This is indeed Vanessa Beeley. You heard her. Yes, you did. Take good care of yourself, Vanessa. Have a good day, darling. Lovely to have you with us.
Thanks,
Vanessa
Sonia.
Beeley. Wonderful. She's so powerful. The thing is, it's authentic. What she cares about what she's covering. And I meet a lot of journalists, but there are very few like Vanessa Beeley, because it matters to her. It absolutely matters to her. And yes, we are an open house here. If you disagree with her, tell me so. Tell me so, people. Peter says she's brilliant as always. Brilliant as always. Right, before we bring in our next guest, I want to just show you something, guys. Let me see what I've got that I wanted to quickly show you. This makes me deeply uncomfortable. Deeply uncomfortable. People around here know that I'm not happy about surrogacy, especially the way it's become so like industrial trafficking. But I saw this image on Instagram. I'm going to show it you if I can bring it up. Let me see if I can bring it up. Very disturbing indeed. And I think this is where we're heading. And let me just, yeah, it is. Here we go. So, it's saying I've already got too many on the screen. Hold on. Bear with me, people. I really want to show you this because I am disturbed by this. And image. Let me just bring this up. Yeah. So what this is a conference, a gathering. You can see here. Thank you, San Francisco. We just wrapped up one of the most well-attended. It's a San Francisco conference in years. It was, again, a house full of guys who dream of becoming parents, learning about their surrogacy options. We discussed ethics and procedures, medical and legal aspects, community and support, and all of the resources that are available for our wonderful LGBTQ community who wish to become parents. Now, as everybody knows, I was marching with Stonewall, right from the get-go. Well, not right from the get-go, but certainly when it came to the UK, and we were supporting them in the 80s and the 90s. I'm absolutely an ally. What I'm not an ally of is legalized trafficking. And to see actually a room full of men who are getting advice on how they can buy babies disturbs the hell out of me. It disturbs me so much. Here we go again. So where are the women? There is a huge market in men essentially buying babies these days. It's real. It's huge. It's happening. And there have been some cases where a number of men, actually one couple in particular, were found to have got their babies from surrogates, and then they were trafficking them to paedophiles within their circle. And that's obviously not to say that all gay men are paedophiles or traffickers. Absolutely not. I am disturbed by surrogacy, whether it's a man or a woman. Bottom line, I'm disturbed by it. I think it is legalized trafficking. We don't know who these people are. They're literally traveling across the world and picking up babies half the time that they have absolutely no link to whatsoever. There's something really wrong about that. Something highly disturbing. So I just want to show you that. It is a woman's issue too. Yes, it certainly is. And we've talked about it from all aspects. I just saw this image and I was just disturbed by it. So there you go. There you go. Right. I want to change up the gear completely. Let's actually, where are all the women is probably very pertinent to what I'm just about to discuss. So let us bring her in. Let me just find the details. Here she is, first of all. Catherine Stone. She's an author. She's a counsellor. Hello, Catherine. How are you?
Hi. Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you with us. Of course, you're actually on to talk to us about the power of the feminine. Now, we don't hear about that often. We often portrayed, aren't we, as women, that we either have to become more masculine in order to be able to survive this, but there is a great denigration towards our femininity. And you have written a book, 12 Powers of the Feminine and How to Change the World. And I completely agree with the premise of the book. And at the end of this, you're also going to be giving away a signed copy of the book. Talk to us. Why have we been so misled about what an empowered woman is with our femininity? What's been going on?
Wow. Well, that's wow. That is probably the most scary question, isn't it? My understanding is that what's been going on is this stuff that it's linked. So all this whole stuff about getting women out of the house to become taxpayers is all linked. But I try not to talk about that too much in the book because I want to appeal to people who might be terrified to go there as to, the political, what I call the shadow politics, actually.
Understood. A lot of that happened around wartime, didn't it? Because I studied psychology, and one of the things that we understood, that I actually learned about, was the whole issue of attachment theory, and that really dumped on women in a tremendous way. So during the Second World War, they wanted women to stock the factories because obviously they sent the men off to war for the most part. And then when that was over, they wanted women back out of the workplace, but women had found the workplace. They wanted women back out of the workplace. So they commissioned these studies, including to do with attachment theory, which was funded by the government at the time. And it was very much, children cannot be separated from women. So we've been subject to one mass manipulation after another, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And shamed for our feminine ways. So it's interesting how I called it. Well, I didn't call the title just came to me. It just arrived, but I understood why it was 12 powers of the feminine rather than 12 ways of the feminine, because with us being as conditioned as we are, the only way to sell it was to call it power. which
Oh,
my,
wow.
the way I understand masculine and feminine energy is that power is actually masculine principle.
Yes.
It is strength that is the feminine principle.
Right.
But
Right.
I don't think it sells quite so well, because women, we want that power, you know, but
There's nothing wrong with being powerful. If we are
Exactly.
all raised in our power, males and females, what
Yes.
tremendous world this would be, right? We wouldn't
Yes.
be, you know,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be petty. It wouldn't be silly envy or jealousy. None of that. We would all be strong in ourselves.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and you're absolutely right, is we've been taught, regardless of male or female, we've been taught this idea to rely on this inner masculine energy, and men are absolutely berated for it, even though you acknowledge that we've got both, haven't we, male
Yeah.
and female.
Yeah.
So men are berated when they search deep and go for their masculine energy, and women are left in this kind of state of flux, right? Because
Yeah.
I said to you yesterday, when I was growing up, people used to call me a tomboy, and it was because I was assertive. I knew my own mind, and they automatically assumed that these were traits that were associated with being male. And we've just lost sight of it. And I want to know why. Why have we lost sight of it? What happened along the way? Have we been taught to lose sight of it? Is it part of a big program to weaken us?
I
Go
believe
on.
so. I believe so. I believe we've just been gradually shamed away from the feminine ways as a way to actually break down the family. My more sort of recent realizations, if you like, are that when a couple meet one another, they are naturally in a state of service to one another. So he will serve her with his masculinity. The door is open for her. The chair is open for her. He will serve her in his masculine ways. And she will serve him in her feminine ways. You know, she will tend to be quite nurturing and caring. There's this mutuality that in Tantra, it's what creates that zzz, zzz, that vavavoom, that electricity. And then the kids come along, and because the whole tribe has been completely thrown asunder, she is then abandoned on her own, bringing up the kids on her own. And he then has to then be the whole tribe and her lover, and it's actually impossible.
Oh, absolutely. We are demanding way too much of each other, aren't we?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the thing is, what you're actually saying, and I concur, and that is, if we've been given these things, these are our birthrights, who we are, what we can bring to each other. And I've never seen myself as being subservient to anybody else, but I'm absolutely prepared to be in service to other people.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm subservient, neither to a man or a woman.
Again, the language that is used, I mean, I was looking up the other day while doing a video. I was looking up menial. I had somebody asked me on Facebook, oh yes, how can we be feminine without doing menial tasks? so I felt like that was an interesting question, and so I did a video looking up what menial actually meant, and it was derogatory, and it's to do with I'm trying to remember now. It was to do with a task that is beneath one.
Wow.
Domestic duties, and something about kitchens, I think. I can't quite remember, but the point is that just that word exists.
I hear you.
Is an attack on the feminine.
Right.
Because
and
for me, the act of the feminine ways, how a woman might prepare a meal, how a woman might, and I'm going to say this, and it feels scary and dangerous, but it needs saying, how a woman might wash up her dishes and dry them. It's all sacred to me. It's all the feminine ways. It's all ritual.
But you're not saying that men can't wash dishes, aren't you? That's not what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying.
And that's where people want to misunderstand you. They want to divide you up.
But
yes.
Traditionally, originally, we women would have been doing these tasks together. There was sisterhood. But of course, there isn't anymore. So we're on our own in the kitchen and we're pissed off and we say, oh, come on. Well, I was about to swear. I'm a terrible swearer. Come and do the wretched washing up. I've cooked, you wash up, right? So it's basically the way the communities and the tribe has been, thrown asunder. It's left us abandoned. It's left women abandoned in the home. And therefore wanting to go out. I mean, who wants to stay in the kitchen, cook dinner, wash up, hoover? Who wants to do that? Nobody wants to do it. We want to go out. And of course, he comes home from work. Yay, hi, honey. And we're like, oh, I'm glad you've had a nice time.
It's mad. It's still like with the 1950s. I actually love cleaning up my home. And I take great pride in it. And I take great pride in cooking for my family as well. And all of those things I do with love. And I don't see them at all as demeaning or any of those things.
They're holy things, and they hold the family together. And this is what the feminine does. It's very much to do with the earth element and the water element. And the earth element contains and holds. So we're very much like the earth, we're the banks of the river and the river itself. But, how we hold our family in these rituals and these ways is a holy and very necessary thing.
Yes. And the other thing there's a whole load of stuff that we could be saying about this book, but one of the things that I think is interesting, and that is where you talk about how the feminine force has been hidden, like literally hidden.
Well, it is hidden. It is, you see, it's like how direct could I be here? It's a penis and a vagina thing. Yeah. Right. Penises are very visible. Yeah. And the fire element.
Oh, I see. Hidden,
very visible.
Protruding. Got you.
The feminine is very hidden. Another example of this is a theatre production. So you've got all the actors and, the main actors, and the lights are on them, and it's very bright and all very, very visible. And at the end, we applaud, don't we? We applaud the actors, and the orchestra gets a sort of cursory, we sort of go, oh, yeah, right. But we're really applauding the show. We'd be there forever if we applauded the feminine aspects of that, because the show, the lights, the production would be seen as the masculine principle. Right. But the feminine is every single thing that happened in order to enable that production to happen. Right. Right down to we'd be clapping for the pizza delivery boy that delivered pizza during rehearsals. We'd be clapping for the mother-in-law of the main actor who was babysitting for the kids because his wife was ill. I mean, and we don't applaud the feminine. We just naturally know that we'd be there all year if we did that. So we applaud the big production and then we go home. And again, that's not to suggest that if you're female, if you're a woman, you can't be the big production, right? Yeah, absolutely. I'm female. Absolutely. I consider myself the big production, right? I'm my own production. Yes, the lights, right? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm also capable of taking care of the mother-in-law and the babysitting and all that. And that's something that men isn't as well. And we really need to start embracing this stuff more. It shouldn't all be very shouty, very masculine. It should also, we should be much more embracing of that feminine side of us. And I do think it is, I think it's about dividing the family, as you say. I think it's all of these huge big issues at play that are taking place, but we need to be able to embrace both sides. So how do we start? Just say, because there'll be people and also a lot of females who are being raised at this time are going through a terrible period because they are hit by more advertising than ever before, telling them that they're not good enough, they're not feminine enough. No wonder
the biggest demographic next to middle-aged men who are transitioning are teenage girls. Teenage girls are the biggest demographic who are transitioning from girls who claim to boys. No wonder, though, they can never quite measure up to what, because females now are apparently, you know, women with false breasts and like altered faces. That's what we consider now to be feminine, don't we? And to be female.
I was doing a little event a week ago, and a lady was looking at my sort of stall thing with my books on it, and I just sort of gently said to her after a while, I said, "Are you interested in feminine energy?" And she stood there and put her head down. And basically she went somewhere within herself. And then she said, I've got no idea what that is. And I feel a bit emotional. I felt emotional while I was with her. Yeah. And I just touched her arm and I just said, "You're not alone."
Not alone at all. This is We've got some great comments coming in. Gaslighting Gilligan has said, and quoting Orwell, "We have cut the links between child and parent and between man and woman. No one dares trust a wife, a child, or a friend any longer." And that's from 1984. This is
like, I don't know how many generations of attachment trauma. I mean, attachment wounds, attachment issues. It's not good.
No, it's not good.
It's our future. I believe our future is going to be completely amazing. I have heard this.
I have total hope, but we can only have that amazing future by airing this type of conversation and, you know, and beating it until it makes some kind of sense. Shug in the comments says we are supposed to complement each other's energies, but we've been so altered and perverted by society. I mean, the reality is, we are not value free. None of us, you know that as a counsellor, right? We all come to the party with something. I'll come with my issues and whatever happened to me in childhood and whoever upset me. And so we have all of that going on as well. So, and there's so many pressures that are going on. But another thing that I think you seek to answer in the book, which I think is really interesting, because I don't know what you ever thought about men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but from a psychological perspective, there was kind of like a lot of stereotyping in there that was, like, I thought, quite unhealthy. And while also acknowledging that men and women are different and we should be praised as such. Totally agree with that.
So where I haven't read that book for a long time. Yeah, I did find it very inspiring at the time, but I see these because I've been sort of studying or following masculine and feminine energies for about 30 years now. I understand these forces as archetypal rather than stereotypical. They're archetypal forces that when we're in touch with them, we become more. We're not lessened by them. So a really good start to answer your question is to know that the feminine force, the yin feminine force, is this way. It's in and down. So feeling our feet on the floor, feeling our sitting bones on the seat, and taking a breath into our, whether male or female, but I'm just talking specifically to women here, taking a breath into our feminine body and grounding. That is one way we can start. Even if just once a day we take 5 minutes out of our lunch hour, 5 minutes out of our lunch hour, to just sit and breathe into our feminine body. That is feminine energy.
Right. Got you. And the thing is, it's not an exclusion of men here. You're absolutely acknowledging that not only men can be feminine, but it's actually important that they understand that side of themselves as well, right?
Yeah. But what's happening is there seems to be an agenda where women are being forced to be more masculine
Got you.
And men are being forced to be more feminine.
Right.
Now, what happens with that in a relationship, in marriage, is it flattens the polarity. And what happens then is that you get, at best, you get no sex.
Right.
And at worst, you get incredible conflict.
Right.
Because when the polarity is flat, she is likely to get into contempt and hatred of him. And he'd be like, what the?
Yeah, what's happening here?
Yeah, I'm doing everything for you, la, 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 la. And then he'll be in his feelings and his emotions, which of course is the feminine. And it just cycles into nowhere. So in supporting people's fundamental feminine or masculine energy, the women need to come down and into themselves, and the men need to go this way. It's like getting out into the world to do what they are meant to be doing, building the world, doing what they've come here to do. Us women too. Yes, this is not about.
I know it's not about sending him back into the kitchen. I understand that. No, it's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about actually finding our true power, so
Yeah.
that we see that doing washing up after dinner is not any more demeaning than being part of a powerful meeting.
Yeah. But
That's what's right.
Yeah, there is that general tendency. So the fire element is expansive. It goes out. So that's why men tend to do better out in the world. And because the feminine energy is yin and comes this way and is to do with containment, we tend to do better in the home. But it's so important that we do whatever we need to do in order to learn and grow and develop. But it's just embracing that. So like a woman maybe that's out of the home all week might need to really make sure she is in the home all weekend to recharge her feminine energy. Otherwise, she's going to be, prone to exhaustion, prone to illness, basically.
Right. And all of this, actually acknowledging who we are at the core of us, is about, that surely is about us being able to live our lives as fully as humanly possible. This is not about reducing us. This is about expanding us, right?
Yes, although it's delicate. And I've had one client who's been with me for quite a few years, and she said to me just the other day, and she's been seeing me weekly for years. She said, I think I'm beginning to get this. It's a huge subject, this. It really is a huge subject. And it's complex. How do we be more feminine? But then we need to also know our fire element in order to stand our ground, or like me doing this, and you yourself, Sonia. It's like I couldn't be sitting here talking like this if I wasn't using my masculine energy.
Right. Got you. No, I have a lot of masculine energy, not least I'm Leo. I'm ruled by the sun, which is the masculine energy. And actually that brings me to something else that you'd said. And that is, you don't talk about the sun and the moon, which they often talk about, don't they, in terms of male and female. What do you talk about?
I talk about the sun and the earth. And the sun, rises, shines down on the earth, and the earth goes, and unfurls, and then pops all her seeds. It's very much a dance between the sun and the earth. And we are very much like the earth, very, very much like it.
I love it. I think it's empowering. I think that's the whole point about this conversation. It's about empowering us. It's not about anything demeaning. If you've got anything demeaning from this, please don't. That's not the aim of it. This is very much
conditioning.
That is exactly the conditioning, right? Exactly right there. Now, listen, you're obviously very kindly going to give us a signed copy of this wonderful book. Usual rules apply, kids, and that is the competition will remain open until 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Use your email address, soniapoulton@sky.com. I'm sure our lovely mods will put the address in the live chat if you need it. And I'll do my usual random selection. I put them into their own folder, and then I close my eyes and I go up and down and I go boom. And there's the feminine intuition that will pick the winner of this book. Is there such a thing as feminine intuition?
Oh, well, do you know, that's a bit more complex. That's another conversation. There's another principle. There's 3 principles. We've got the feminine principle, the masculine principle, and then we've got where they meet. And that is the neutral principle, or what I call the God principle. And that we would see with intuition.
So that requires a coming together of all of the elements. When
we're in the neutral principle, the perfect example would be when we're in that meditative state, where we're in that completely neutral state. We're not being overly receptive. We're not being overly active. We're just plain neutral. But there's other states that relate to that. For example, vulnerability. There's something very neutral about it.
Right.
And intuition is very much to do actually with this part of the body. Well, this is my teaching on this. There's going to be so many different people.
Of course.
And we hear about feminine intuition, don't we?
A lot.
I wonder if that's more a deep knowing, a deep feminine knowing, and wisdom is one of the feminine powers. It's what we women in particular, we have that access to that deep wisdom because we're of the earth. Got you.
Wonderful talking to you. Lovely. Very lovely. This is like one of your first kind of interviews, isn't it? Is that right?
Yes, my first one. Yes.
Look at you. You're an absolute natural at it. You didn't falter at all. Absolutely lovely to have you with us. Catherine, before you leave us, just final word with you. Anything at all that you'd like to add?
Oh, goodness me. That's quite a thing, isn't it?
It always proves quite difficult. It's like asking people to suddenly draw up their own biography. People struggle with that, don't they? It's like it's one of those difficult things, but go on, go for it.
I just want to say to the women here, come in and down to your feminine heart. And to you men, stand up and honor your masculinity. It's all right.
It is all right. It's more than all right. We can all be healing if we remember who we are.
We need the masculine, the feminine. The feminine force needs the masculine force. Don't believe the conditioning. Yeah.
Right, that you can do it all yourself, because we're getting, I mean, I know we're ending this conversation, but we are getting further and further away from humanity, and like, oh, AI can do this, and you know, you're not going to need men for this, and that is literally, again, it's
always going to need men.
Yes, we are. We're always going to need men. Damn straight we are. Lovely to talk to you, everybody. This is Catherine Stone, isn't she? Lovely to have you with us. Happy weekend to you. Take good care of yourself. Wonderful. What a lovely lady. Thank you. Lovely lady. Right. So there you go, kids. Write to me, Sonia Poulton at sky.com. And the one I pick out randomly, not from my feminine intuition, apparently, but from the coming together of the wisdom that makes us both who we are. I'm very happily and proudly in touch with both my masculine and feminine sides, because one of my friends once said to me, I think I must have been about, I don't know, maybe in my 20s. And he once said to me, it's a lie, you know, this whole idea that men are running things, women are in power. And I was like, what are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense. James Brown sings is a man's world. We all know that men get away with this and that, and women have to do this. And my friend turned to me, looked at me and said, the women always hold the cards. The women, obviously, unless you're dealing with a rapist, but we're not talking about that, but the women decide whether there's going to be relations. The women decide whether this is going to happen. That's what my friend said. And I think he was very wise. How are you all? I saw that funny comment from Jules. That was quite funny. Jules said, are we going to hold a 1 minute? I can't find it now, Jules, but it was funny. I saw it when, let me see if I can. You said, are we going to hold a 1 minute silence for the brave MPs who are in Parliament this weekend, right? I think it's like the first time in decades that they've had a weekend debate. And isn't this to do with British Steel and silly Ed Miliband and net zero. Absolute madness. I wonder if I can get Paul, what's his name, on with us on Wednesday to discuss this. Anyway, no, yes, Jules, let's have our 1 minute silence, right? Because obviously at the moment they're on holiday. They shouldn't be on holiday anyway. Politicians have very long holidays. They shouldn't be having long holidays. Not to this degree, but anyway, they returned to Parliament at the weekend to discuss this about, British Steel. You're literally closing down British industries. And now all of a sudden, where have they been for the last 3 decades when this has all been happening? Anybody want to tell me? Because I have no idea. And also interesting to see that Weira Hobhouse, Lib Dem MP for Bath, I think, was refused admission to China. Ed Davey, leader, has written to David Lammy to ask him to summon the Chinese ambassador after Weira Hobhouse was refused entry to Hong Kong when visiting her family, apparently simply because she is a British MP. We're going to see more and more of this, aren't we? My only encounter with Weira Hobhouse was when, on her watch, she allowed the Family Sex Show. That title alone should tell you everything you need to know. The Family Sex Show at Bath, I think it was the Egg, but it was at a theatre in Bath. And I loudly and bitterly complained about it because it was highly sexualized. There were issues of masturbation. There were children in the audience. And this was all on her watch as an MP. And she wouldn't respond to me about it. And they just went ahead with it. So that's my only dealing with her. Of course, I make no inference from that whatsoever. I don't know her other than to know that on her watch, she allowed the Family Sex Show to go ahead, which was deeply inappropriate for children, and children watched it. That's it. It didn't go ahead for the full run, by the way. They had like private evenings, which was even worse because there was so much made about it that they ended up having these private showings and children were there, young children. Creepy people, creepy people. How are you in the comments? Let me just catch up with you. Everything is so degenerate. It's all by design. Indeed, Ed Miliband is at war with the carbon footprint in the UK. This is John, which is being filled up by the importation of people via his brother and associated charities, in quotes. Is it just me, or have we all become sick of charities? Like, as soon as somebody tells me they're either running a charity or they're launching a charity, I distance myself. I don't want anything to be done with people who are launching charities, because I have such a bad taste in my mouth about charities, which is terrible. But a lot of the stuff that we have charities for should be part of what we're paying our taxpayer money for. So that is obviously a problem. Right. Email from Raymond. Good morning to you, Raymond. Raymond said, hey, Sonia. Is the death clause in music contracts worth of a look, or just another conspiracy? And as I said to Raymond, it's always worth a look, Raymond. Of course, we were talking about Prince on Friday. I've talked before about Whitney Houston. We've talked about Michael Jackson. Every single one of those have benefited the people who have been left behind as a consequence. So you have to wonder about it. But the thing about the death clause, it's basically a music industry standard. And it just highlights this awful, awful reality that artists become frequently more valuable in death than they did in life. And oftentimes what happens when you have artists, brilliant artists like Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Prince, is they speak out, right? And so oftentimes, like, the decade leading up to their death has often been filled with them behaving how they want to. And it doesn't have to be a bad behavior, but just not the puppets that the music industry became used to. And I talked about Prince and how I work for Music of Life. What I forgot to mention, of course, which was always weird and a synchronicity attached to it, was when I was looking at the date. This was from Friday's show. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can always catch up there on Friday's show. But when I was looking at the date of when I was had been brought in to run Music of Life Records for Prince's only #1, because the bosses were away on holiday, it was actually, the anniversary was actually last week. And it was so weird. And I did that again recently about a story. And often what happens is ideas pop into my head around the anniversary without me even realizing it's the anniversary. And it's only when I start to drill down and I'm like, oh my God, this was the date. It was 9th of April, as one example. Anyway, going back to the death clause. So obviously artists like Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Prince, there are others, absolutely. Liam Payne is a more recent one, where people think that it may well be that they were taken out because not only had they become more problematic, but the income revenue had dried up. And obviously what happens, Michael Jackson is a perfect example. I know one woman who was not a Michael Jackson fan, and when he died, she bought his entire collection. Like, why? Right. And she suddenly, became very maudlin and very upset about it. And like, he was a great artist, but you didn't actually support him when he was alive. And now you're supporting him, and all the money is going to people other than him. And the same thing with Prince, obviously. And Prince is a very interesting one, an absolute betrayal that took place with Prince, which I didn't mention on Friday. But Raymond, you forced me to look this up, and when I did look it up, I've forgotten this, and it made me so angry. And that is after, bear in mind, Prince had fallen out with Warner Brothers, his record label, right? And in fact, I think I've still got, here we go, hold on, bear with me, I've still got this on my desk. Emancipation was the album that he made when he signed to his new label, and it was all about being emancipated from Warner's. Well, what his people did in his death, it's just awful, it makes me so sick, is they partnered with Warner Brothers to release deluxe editions, previously unreleased music that he chose not to release. Yet these ghouls got together. So that's what kind of like the death clause is, right? In terms of that. Okay. It's not actually as such a clause that exists where it goes, when you die, we are going to exploit you to hell and back, even though you've been a pain in the ass for the last 10 years and we weren't able to get you to do any of the things that we wanted you to do. And you were, striking out on your own. And that's what they did. I think that is an absolute betrayal, releasing people's material after their death, right? They chose not to release it. And unless they explicitly left behind a will saying, release this in the event of my death, which I don't believe for a second that Prince did, but to team up with the very company that he said made him a slave is an absolute betrayal. And also, Ray, can I just say that when I started doing a deeper dive on this, I actually think one of the very first people who was exploited, because they call it a death shock phenomenon, this whole idea of this death clause. And so basically, going back to this friend of mine who didn't like Michael Jackson, but suddenly he died. She's like, oh my God, Michael Jackson, great talent. I need all his material. And that's called a death shock phenomenon. And the earliest that I could kind of trace it to in terms of commerciality was actually Elvis Presley. And I remember his death in 1977. And my friend Susie, who was also actually not an Elvis fan, suddenly became absolutely beside herself. And so obviously what happened once he died, they transformed Graceland, his mansion, into a kind of pilgrimage site. Same thing they've done with Paisley Park and Prince. Okay. And RCA Records absolutely capitalized to hell and back. And I say to hell and back with meaning on Elvis's back catalogue. And so those are the things that happen. And it's just so wrong. And the thing is, what also happens is on death, artists will often move from kind of controversy. So Michael Jackson obviously had been repeatedly accused of being a child abuser, and he moved from controversy while he was alive to a saint status in death. None of them are accurate. But it is a fact that certain celebrities absolutely become more financially valuable posthumously when their ongoing career or public behavior poses challenges, or they get diminishing returns for their labels. And once they're out of the way, that's when it all kicks in. And the thing is, when a celebrity is alive, so is very much everything that they stand for, their decisions, their health, their changing public image. Some of these things that record companies and publishers and management companies cannot manage. They cannot manage. And so they lose control. They cannot make the same strategic decisions that they did previously. So yes, Raymond, I think absolutely it was worth revisiting. And not least because I discovered that after Prince died, his estate teamed up with the very people that he was running away from, and who arguably may have been involved in some way with his demise. That sounds like an absolute betrayal to me. Everything is so degenerate. Everything. Elvis was into young girls. Deborah, he was. I in a report that I'd done about famous male stars, I've included him because I think Priscilla was only, was she 14 when he first met her? Absolutely. Soul Sand said, Elvis is the only one who apologized for stealing songs from indigenous American women. The Beatles and the Stones never did. I mean, why y'all think there has never been an Elvis or Beatles or Stones? Got you. James wants to know if record labels are just cover for criminal gangs. I think that might be one of the truest things I've heard in a very long time. Right. Geoengineering, of course. Hello, Happy Potter. And hello, you all, for sending me images over the weekend. Sean, you sent me loads of chem pictures. I still need to get them into an order, darling. I wonder if I've got any here that I can actually bring up. When was this from, Sean? There was one in this one. I want to show this one. This one is disturbing. I'm going to show Happy Potters in a minute. But Sean, I thought this one was quite disturbing. Let's have a look at this. Sean, if you're in the comments, remind me, because I haven't picked up the notes, when this was taken, would you? Let me have a look at this. I think this was sometime last week, wasn't it? I think this was sometime last week. Oops, it's not showing it on the big screen. Let me... Oh, there you go. That is clearly not regular air trails. I mean, plane trails. Clearly, absolutely clearly. And thank you, Sean. Thank you so much. And also, Happy Potter. This is from yesterday, which I think is interesting as well. Let me just bring those up. Monday images. Happy Potter. These are... Oh, it's telling me no, you can't. You can't. Let me just remove some of these images. Only allows me to do 10 at the time. Right, there you go. I thought this was fairly devastating to see these as well. You can see them. That actually looks like kind of droplets from them, doesn't it? It's quite bizarre. That's two images. One at the bottom is looking above a house, and the other is kind of like looking in the far distance. But yeah, that's what was happening yesterday. And what about the unprecedented hailstorm that was in Gaines, Florida? Did anybody see the size? Come on, mate. This is not regular hail. Let me show you this. That can't possibly be regular hail. Look at this. They're like golf balls. Anybody know what this was, right? Golf ball sized hail at 6:35 p.m. This was on Saturday, I believe. It was preceded by severe thunderstorms. And one viewer wrote in, Dilly, said, never seen anything like this ever. What is it? I don't know, Dilly, is the short answer. I have no idea. That does not look like hail to me. That looks like ice. But big chunks of ice. What is hail, by the way? Isn't hail some kind of formation? Somebody give me the scientific explanation for hail, would they? Please. They've had a few recently. They have. Big lumps of ice. So dangerous. It is big lumps of ice. Yeah. Huge. Absolutely huge. Thanks, Dilly, for sending that in. Absolutely mad. Weather weapons, says Chris. And I have to agree. Pretty sure they have had hurricanes in Ukraine and Russia. Anybody heard that? All those eastern countries. What's that? All those eastern countries. What's that? They're all... Oh, I see. No, okay. Armin would love to have a snowball fight. Really? Right. Randy's been in a hailstorm once. Some of them was the size of handballs. Huge. Goodness, I wouldn't want to be in a hail situation like that. Size of handballs, indeed. I want to reflect on this because I think it's quite curious. And that is on this day in history, of course. Excuse me. On this day in history, of course, RSM. Titanic, a British ocean liner, was said to have hit an iceberg and sank in the early hours of the 15th of April, 1912. Let us bring in an image of this. Titanic, gone down in history. Woo! I mean, when I said gone down in history, unfortunate wording. In fact, yesterday when I said to my daughter, I'm going to do a deep dive about the Titanic, she just kind of looked at me like, Mum, do you realize what you just said? Yes, indeed, I do realize what I just said without actually meaning to. But this was the original Titanic, of course, maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York City in 1912. It was the second time that the White Star Line had lost a ship on its maiden voyage, the first being RMS Taylor in 1854. And on the Titanic, we heard that of the estimated 2,224 passengers and crew aboard, approximately 1,500 died. Figures vary depending on what historic research you're looking at. But it was said to have made the incident one of the deadliest peacetime sinkings of a single ship. The ship contained very wealthy people. And this is where the conspiracies come in, kids. Oh, yes, indeed. And I'm sure that many of our viewers have heard the various conspiracies and they are curious. So let's kind of reflect on them. I think probably the biggest and most well-known one involves, let me just bring him in, involves this man. There he is. JP Morgan, banker indeed. And he actually financed and owned the Titanic. And the idea was that he wanted to form the Federal Reserve, and he was very much involved in forming the Federal Reserve after the sinking of the Titanic. And the idea was that he wanted to remove 3 people in particular who were in opposition to the Federal Reserve. It was very wealthy people on the Titanic when it went down. And but so the Titanic itself, it was built in Belfast. It had the journey from Belfast to Southampton, and then it started its maiden voyage across the Atlantic to New York. So the JP Morgan one is the idea, as I say, was that, but and a lot of it does bear out. And here's why: because he was due on that trip and he actually cancelled it, right? He cancelled his journey just hours before his proposed departure. And I went through various historic references about this, and nobody seems to have any rationale as to why he cancelled being aboard that ship. And so but what we do know is that 3 of the wealthiest men on earth, as it was described then, were on board, and that was John Astor, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim rather. And so we were told that the idea was that he wanted to eliminate any opposition at all to the Federal Reserve. And it is true, he had an absolute hand in creating the Federal Reserve. And he owned the International Mercantile Marine, which owned the White Star Line and thus the Titanic. So you can see why people think there's something increasingly dodgy about this. This is a story that's gone on for a very, very long time. And many people have said, yeah, absolutely, he was involved in that. And then there's another one, which I'm sure you all know as well, or you may not. And that is the story of the switch, the Titanic and Olympic switch theory. And that originated from an author in Oxford, and it's launched a million stories. I mean, again, I can't help with these ship metaphors. They're just kind of coming to me. And the idea was that the Olympic was unable to sail, and there were problems with the Titanic. And what they did was that they switched over the 2. It was an insurance fraud. The theory has been around since the 1990s. And some people describe it as the greatest fraud in modern history. In other words, it wasn't the Titanic that went down, it was the Olympic. And you see the ships side by side. I'm not sure that they even look alike. But that was the story that originated from Robin Gardner in Oxford, I think about 1947 or so. So these theories have been going on for a very, very long time. But what is absolutely clear is very few people believe the official story. What are you saying in the chat there? What are you saying in the chat there? What's that? And when the ship hits the fan. Anyone seen that film? Of course, what we've heard is there were minor differences from the outside. Right. Okay. So, Shug, am I of the understanding that you believe this, the Olympic Titanic switch theory? The Olympic went down. Oh, Soul Sound does. Book written years before the event. Fake. No icebergs that far down on the equator, says Ella Design. It was on fire when it left port, according to some witnesses. Yes, the problem is because it's so long ago. I mean, literally over a century ago. It's very, very difficult to trace original sources. But what is absolutely clear is within days, because I managed to trace back that far, but within days, people were questioning what had really happened. And always, no matter what the story is, the earlier that you can get any kind of evidence, the better, frankly. I think that it lends itself actually in both directions. I think there is potential for both. And Stu Peters, podcaster, he believes that the Rothschilds were involved. He's advanced this theory that the Rothschilds were behind both the Federal Reserve and the Titanic sinking. And he also claimed that the that the submersible implosion was orchestrated via sabotage in order to prevent its own passengers from discovering that the Titanic was sunk by a controlled demolition instead of an iceberg. So lots of people have lots of ideas. Never mind, we got a lovely film out of these murders. Maria, we did. We got a beautiful film starring, what was it, Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, all very romantic and dewy. And yes, perhaps it was both theories. I think, here we go again, right? It's my understanding that when we're dealing with situations like this, oftentimes the truth lies somewhere in between. What I feel absolutely certain about was that this was not an organic happening. This was not an accident per se. It was an awful film. It does seem there was no iceberg, says Shug. I think a lot of people say that. They make movies to hammer home the official narrative. Foxy says situation. I like that. Did I say that? I mean, I'm capable of saying that. Charlie is getting funnel vision. I can feel the gags coming now. Right. Okay, gorgeous people. Russell Brand, I'm genuinely appalled that Russell Brand is attempting to essentially litigate in the public arena his criminal charges. That isn't the way it goes. And let me just see if I can bring up a picture of him. He obviously made his own video refuting the charges, but that again, that's not how it works, kids. The issues that he's facing are not to be debated in the public arena. The issues he is facing are for the courts. And discussing his guilt or otherwise, as some idiot podcasters have done, is actually sub judice, is contempt of court. It is not for us to decide any of those things. I'm just making kind of like observations about his behavior. I think he is sounding increasingly erratic and unhinged. He knows he's in a tight spot, and he's hoping that by claiming he's a genuine threat to the establishment, his followers will continue supporting him. The whole thing of I am actually deeply upset by this whole idea, which you know, he talks about how when you're a famous guy, kind of people will queue up, women will sort of queue up around the block for you. That is really, really offensive, right? And here's why: is yes, females will queue around the block for you, and I bet they did for Russell Brand, but not every female, right? And that is the problem. Oftentimes, when you're dealing with these people who've been bigged up so much because of their fame, their narcissism or whatever, is they don't want the women who are queuing around the block. They want the women who don't want them. I'm not saying that applies to Russell. I'm just saying this whole idea that women were throwing themselves at him, so why on earth would he need to do any of these 4 things that he's accused of, doesn't bear out. It doesn't bear out under scrutiny, because the reality is that oftentimes these people don't want the women who are throwing themselves at them. That's just the reality. And I think it's interesting, talking about Russell Brand, by the way, I see his former handler, the woman he formerly handled. Oh, wait, which way round was it with Katy Perry? Anyway, she's gone off to space or whatever with Jeff Bezos's partner, Lawrence Sanchez, a number of other people. Remember this? I think this was at the Grammys, and Russell is holding the obey sign between his fingers. Not like us. Not like us. Not like us. So anyway, I want to show you something. This is lovely. This is rather nice. Let's change up the... Oh, why won't you come off the stage? Come off the stage, Russell. This is frozen. Let me see if I can get rid of it. Yeah, he don't want to go. He don't want to go. Sally wrote in. This is lovely. She said, I saw a blue creature flying by your head on episode 99. So my daughter and I looked at this. We couldn't stop watching it. This is actually mad. I'm going to show you 2 videos. Right, I'll show you one. Here's the first one. Check it out. This is in normal speed. Consternation. Oh. Why is that one still on? Get off the screen. Right, let's have a look. See if you can see this. Consternation towards RFK. Right, do you see that blue thing? Let's do it again. This is in real time. Consternation towards RFK. Serious consternation. Right, and this is slow motion. What is that blue thing flying by my head, kids? It's blue. There it is. Let me... What is that? I don't remember seeing it. I Vape King, blue bug. Is it a blue bug? I think Crazy Bunny, she's always picking up this sort of stuff, but that I thought was really interesting. And I've no idea what it is, Sal. No idea at all. But curious. Let's play it again. That is weird. That is weird. Vape King says it looks like a bug or a fairy. A wee beastie, an orb spirit. I love all of these. Thank you, Lenticular Cloud. Thank you very much. Really enjoying Catherine Stone's eloquent messaging. Thanks for the great show. Thank you. I very much appreciate that. And lovely Sally had a conversation about geoengineering with AI. She said she was surprised by what it said at the end of our conversations. And so I've got it here. And the final thought was, you're absolutely right to suspect that national laws mean little in a global sky. Even one rogue actor or one covert multinational agreement could affect everyone without consent or recourse. Even AI knows we're being bombarded with toxins and poisons. Even AI knows that. Thanks, Sally. I love how observant you all are. That was absolutely lovely to see that, by the way. It's too big to be a bug. I thought so too. What was it? There are no blue bugs. I know it's something good, says Maria. I'm taking that, Maria. That's what I'm taking. And it's a ghost of JFK saying his nephew is a moron. Funny. Good news, Jean, lovely vegan viewer, has been busy protecting all manner of animals from commercial BS this Easter. Jean wrote in, hi Sonia, I hope you are well. I just wanted you to see this. It is a great example of people power working and not accepting things. And in this instance, so many people got behind this, which has now forced them to not include animals. So what was it? Glasgow pub, Church on the Hill, intended to bring live animals into a pub during the Easter period and charge people to pet them. So whatever animals, rabbits, chickens, whatever, sheep, whatever. Who decided this madness? Bring animals into a crowded pub and allow people to pet them. Now, I know that there are petting zoos, obviously, and there's always a lot of controversy around that. But actually, pouring animals in a pub, bit disturbing, frankly. And Crazy Bunny said, just leave animals alone. But anyway, they got together, Jean and a number of other people, and the event has been cancelled due to social media backlash about the animals' welfare. And Church on the Hill made the correct decision not to go ahead with this event. And a number of people stood up to be counted. And I think that this is really important. Listen, we put animals through enough with our absolute arrogance as human beings. We don't need to be taking them into a pub during Easter when people are half cut and just awful. Alcohol and people, what could go wrong? Trevor, what could possibly go wrong? Going to a zoo is animal cruelty. I have to agree with you. Juana Cheeto, I have to agree with you. Like, my attitudes have changed so much over the last 20 years that I'm pretty much intolerant to anything like that. Marine life, anything like that. I have no tolerance for it whatsoever. And but well done, Jean. That is really wonderful. You saved those animals. And that is literally, people power can work. It literally can work. And I love it when it works in that way. And more power to your elbow, lovely. And happy Easter to you. Happy Easter. If it had been a fly or something similar, would we not have seen it fly around more in another direction? Gut feeling says it's a visitor protector. Lots of love. Woo, let's have another blast of it. I want to take it back to here. And let me see if I can move it along and do it really. Look there. There it is. Oh, God, ignore the look on my face, for goodness sake. But look at it. Look at it. What is that? I mean, I literally don't remember feeling anything. I literally don't remember. Marcus said, I love animals more than humans, but they should be respected and left in their natural environment. I can't stand these reptile shops. It's evil. It's a fairy, says Randy. It's definitely something. I don't actually think it is a bug. I love it the way it moves as well. Look at the way it kind of like almost skims me. It comes really close and then it goes. I have no idea what it is, but I love it. It's a fairy, says Crazy Bunny. Right, let's leave it at that. Then it's a blooming fairy. I like that. I like that idea. Donators, thank you as ever to our wonderful donators. Peter B, Farrell, Jilly. I want to thank the person who has been supporting, there's several people who have been supporting Wake Up right from the start, and they like to do so privately, and that's absolutely fine with me. But I want you to know that I truly appreciate the kindness of strangers to building Wake Up. And there are others, you know, who they want to donate. They don't necessarily want me to mention them, but I am more than happy to mention you because I'm so grateful. I'm literally so grateful for the kindness of people, however you donate, however you contribute. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. But I do absolutely acknowledge that not everyone wants publicity, and that's absolutely fine. Right, kids, I think we're heading towards our last item. Have I covered everything that I wanted to? Because I get proper grumpy when I come offline and I haven't covered the things that I wanted to. I get proper grumpy with myself. No, I think we're all up to speed, aren't we? We're all up to speed. Yes, we are. Right. I want to talk about the power of moving in silence. Now, this is a very hard-earned lesson for me, very hard indeed. But what's happened over the last 2 decades or so, we've normalized oversharing via social media, and much of it is frankly a lie. The oversharing that people do speaks volumes about their insecurities. And when I see people on social media telling us their every cough and spit of their relationships, I know instinctively that things are not what they seem. I absolutely know it. If people feel the need to say, oh, he's everything to me, he's la la la, I'm like, what's going wrong in their relationship? Because it just feels like this oversharing thing has gone completely out of control. And the oversharing has not taken us into a more kind of embracing, transparent world. If anything, it has created even more subterfuge and lies about who we really are. And a perfect case in point, of course, about oversharing and is the Watts case. The Watts case, Chris Watts, who murdered his wife, 2 children, an unborn child. But Shanann Watts, the wife, had an extreme oversharing habit, and it kind of intersected with her work, which was also very much about kind of like oversharing on Facebook. She was involved in multi-level marketing, but it was extreme oversharing, and the world appeared to know everything about the Watts, everything, which is why there are so many videos online and people are still analyzing what's going on. But we only knew a curated version. And that was big house, a loving couple and lovely children. But it was a lie. The big house and all the trappings that put them there and put them on social media, they were also up to their eyeballs in debt. And the so-called happy family ended with the husband annihilating them all. So I'm really sick of oversharing on social media because I think it's an absolute lie. And what I learned, I used to overshare. I used to tell people lots of things, what I was doing and what I was planning to do. And the thing is, of course, most social media lies don't usually end up being exposed in such a devastating manner as the Watts family. And may they rest in peace. Terrible, terrible situation that befell Shanann and the children. But I refer to that tragedy simply to reinforce the notion that if people are claiming everything is awesome and that they are super excited, as Shanann used to say, on a constant basis, they almost certainly are not. Then there are people who have no humility. I'm crossing it with humiliation, have no humility and like to show off on social media their wealth and their trappings. Well, how many of those people have been robbed as a consequence of telling the world what they have? There is no doubt that Kim Kardashian's Paris robbery was an absolute consequence of thieves getting wind of where she was and what she had with her, because she's a vulgarian like the rest of her family who feel the need to flaunt their wealth, right? But the era of such influences is ending and people are absolutely sick of oversharing. I know they are, and almost no one feels any sympathy when these people are robbed. That's humans for you. But for me, I learned long ago not to tell people what I'm doing and to try and keep back as much as possible until it has manifested. Now, that may seem odd, seeing as you have literally seen Wake Up be born right in front of your eyes. But what you don't know is how many years it took me to launch it, right? I started Wake Up with a foundation of experience, decades of experience. I was working behind the scenes for many years. Wake Up was an inevitable step for me. So silence is so important for public figures who do or say controversial things, because the more of a heads up you give people about what you plan to do, the more opportunity you give them to stop you. And while David Icke and I don't agree on a whole lot of things, one piece of advice that he gave me when I worked with him was, don't tell people what you're doing before you do it. Great piece of advice. Absolutely great piece of advice. If you tell people too early, you're in danger of losing faith in your own course project. Because the problem is if you tell people, I had this idea, this is what I want to do, and the moment that other people's voices come in, oh, I think you should do this, I think you should do that, it can rock the foundations of your own beliefs of how you should do that project. And so I have learned very late on to keep this stum until I absolutely need to tell people. I literally used to tell the world everything. I went through a period of purging my soul via legacy media, probably about a 10-year period. Over a 10-year period, I told lots and lots, millions of people from newspapers, from TV shows, from radio shows. I told them about my darkest truths about drink and drugs and rock and roll and all that stuff, all the wild life I had before my daughter was born in 1997. But I soon learnt the benefits of working in silence, and there are many. First of all, there are mental and emotional benefits from working in silence, okay? And that is, as I say, you don't have other people jumping in, or I've got this idea, I've got that, right? So that's one of the things, but there's also a reduction in stress, because silence can actually help calm the nervous system, okay? And that immediately leads to a reduction in stress and anxiety. The other thing by working in silence is it immediately improves your focus and concentration on your project. Instead of taking account of what other people are saying, you are focused on it, right? When I decided on Wake Up, although I'd like come up with all manner of different ideas. It was interesting because when I actually launched Rise, the very first breakfast show that I did, I originally wanted to call it Wake Up. And then the owner of the platform had come up with Rise. So I said, all right, go with that. And so we went with that. And then when I was going to launch Wake Up, my producer at TNT actually said to me about something like the Wake Up agenda. And I was like, that's weird, because I originally wanted to call it Wake Up. And so we went with Wake Up. Thank you, Charlotte, darling, prompting me. But the point being is that when we launched last May, I arrived here with everything. Pretty much everything. I know the show has been growing in front of your eyes, but I arrived here with lots of other, all the abilities, all the things that I wanted to do on this show. And I had not shared that far and wide. I had not told people I was going to launch my own show. I just got on with doing it and working out how I could do it and how I could bring in money that would keep me funded. And I've talked about this before, and I made that leap and you caught me. And the other thing that happens when you work in silence is you get this real beautiful regulation of mindfulness and emotional regulation, because you're not like on a I keep using ship metaphors today, but you're not on a sea, right? You're not rocking backwards and forwards. There are physical benefits. You will get improved sleep quality when you cut too many cooks spoil the broth. There's a reason that we say that, right? And so, yes, what's this? People are too nosy, too asking questions about your life, says Soldier. Yeah, well, keep them out of it. The thing is that what happens, especially when you're a public figure, if you start telling people about your personal life, they want to know about everything. So if you end that relationship, they want to know all about that. And of course, that's the point when a lot of public people want to pull back when things are going horribly wrong. But if you've already force-fed your personal life to people, you cannot blame people being curious about which way it's going. We love Charlotte Emma, says Jackie Fogarty. Indeed, we do. So all these good things come from working in silence. So I absolutely implore you to do it right. You will also improve your memory, by the way, because you're not being pulled left, right, and center. You will improve your own skills in terms of your ability to listen and take on board information. But if you've got a million voices in your ear, just don't. And by the way, all of this, the knock-on consequence of all of these things is stimulated brain growth. I've been looking a lot at how, because I'm a woman of a certain age, yeah, and I want to do everything I humanly can not to, have dementia or Alzheimer's or any of those things. But there are ways that you can reduce the chances of those happening, and this job alone is already helping me reduce the chances of this happening, because it keeps my brain active. I have to work with a lot of information, a lot of detail, and so it's all good. And all of this was created in silence. And by the way, do you also know that when you're in silence, you will reduce your cortisol levels? Because what it does is, cortisol is a stress hormone. If you didn't know, it will literally lead you to a calmer and more relaxed state. There's so much to be said for working in silence, so much. And also, by the way, one of the greatest things is that you will strengthen your argument in silence. You will gather evidence in silence, and do not reveal your hand until the last moment. There are things I know right now that the old me would have felt the need to go on social media and say, I know A, B, C, and D about these people, right? I don't. I will hold that back until I want to use it. And that's what working in silence has taught me. This is a chess game. This is our own kind of chess game. So thank you all for being here. I'm so grateful. It's lovely to have you with us. And thank you on the live chat. Thank you wherever you're watching us. I will attempt on Wednesday to live stream on Rumble, but I must remember 24 hours beforehand to set it up. Thank you all so very, very much. Lovely to see you, Colin, and Vape King and Soul Sound, and all of our wonderful mods, of course. And Adele, thank you. Dopamine is a treasured natural resource. It truly, truly is. Send me a reminder. That would be wonderful. I would really appreciate that. You're welcome, Deborah. Lovely to have you with us today. And thank you, Jack and Frank. Very hard to be silent in the comments section. It's all right, Frank. You can express yourself. So I want to end with a comment, with a quote. And I don't know who said this quote, but I like it. And that is, move in silence. Never let them know your next move. Oh, actually, there was one other that I'd picked up that I wanted to say, which I actually is preferable to that. But that's my point, is don't allow people to know your next move. And why? Move in silence. Only speak when it's time to say checkmate. I'll see you Wednesday, kids. Lots of love to you. Thank you for being here today. Take good care of yourself.